Minister, we all knew before 2:30 yesterday that this budget was not going to be easy, and you and your colleagues in government were at pains to condition people about tough, what you said were fair choices. Well, congratulations, you achieved the tough part. Unfortunately, you have completely failed on the fair part. Taoiseach said this morning that he knew and he knows that it's tough, and the problem is that he doesn't seem to understand or do anything about it. And many of those people who voted for Labour in 2011 are ruining their vote and ruining their decision today. They voted on the basis of a series of promises. And clearly you and your colleagues in government have forgotten about those promises. So permit me to remind you, families need Labour in government. Protect child benefit, vote Labour. And then this one, a cut too far. Fine Gael, every little hurts. No need to display Labour's shame. I can't hear. So the second regressive budget in a row to families in particular. You have targeted children for major cuts in a range of areas. We've cut child benefit. You've taxed maternity benefit. You've cut clothing and footwear allowances. What did you give in return? A few childcare places. Minister, one of the most unfair cuts that will impact on about 70,000 families is the cut in the respite care grant. 77,000 actually will cut from their one-off payment of respite, a service that provides huge service to families in very difficult situations, and you singled them out in particular. Every one of the welfare cuts in particular imposed in this budget could have been avoided if you had proceeded with what your backbenchers wanted you to do and put a tax on those who can pay, and put a tax on those over €100,000. It seems, Minister, that this budget was framed in advance with Fine Gael going to war with you and Labour in order that Fine Gael could protect the elites of Irish society in their ambition to be the Tea Party. I want you to confirm, Minister, all of the provisions announced in yesterday's budget will be contained in the social welfare bill when it's published next week, or will there be any changes to any of the provisions announced in any aspect of yesterday's budget ahead of the publication of the social welfare bill?
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Ken Corley.
Maybe we could have the reply, please. Maybe we could have the reply without interruptions. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Minister.
Thank you very much, Ken Corley. Yes, indeed, this is a difficult budget. I don't recall anyone on the government benches at any stage saying other than it would be a difficult budget. And the challenge confronting the government in terms of $3.5 billion being taken out of the economy, with which Fianna Fáil agrees, and they ought to because they negotiated it when they handed over control and direction of economic affairs outside of the country. We were then confronted with how do you do that in a balanced way that protects the most vulnerable and that stimulates greater employment growth in this economy. And I have to say that the achievement of protecting core social welfare rates, protecting the pupil-teacher ratio, which means that there will be more teachers in the classroom because of the demographics, protecting the tax rates for people going to work, creating 10,000 jobs and schemes that have been very successful, like TOOS and Jobs Bridge, restoring home help, defending people with disabilities, and contrary to what Deputy Calleary has said, raising more than $500 million from those who are better off. Deputy Calleary seems to want to ignore the fact that this is the first budget that has addressed issues that have been staring us in the face for so long. Issues like, for example, capping relief on pensions at $60,000 per annum, top slicing people who get enormous severance packages. The measures that have levied more than $500 million from the better off in our society are the main contributors.
Sorry, we don't want any comments on what the Minister is saying. Would you please let him finish? Thank
Well, the difficulty about Fianna Fáil.
Sorry, would you stay quiet?
Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin broke with tradition this time and didn't send their pre-budget submissions for evaluation. So the figures.
Thank you. There's a time limit here, and time is nearly up. Would you please stay quiet?
The figures. If my name was Cowan, I'd stay quiet in this debate.
Would you please stay quiet? Thank you. Sorry, Minister, we're over time now. So
40% of total current spending goes to the social welfare budget. 40%. It contributes 10% to the adjustment here. If anybody can tell me how you can address a budget in circumstances where 40% of current spending goes to social welfare without making some savings in social welfare, it simply can't be done. What we did was well, as John Maynard Keynes said...
Please just ignore them, Minister, because we're over time here. I'll have to ask you to finish. Thank you.
As John Maynard Keynes said, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do? We're confronted with the mess that you left. That's what we have to deal with. That's what we have to deal with. And I am happy to say this morning that thanks to the efforts of the Irish people, 85% of the heavy lifting is behind us. And that is a considerable credit to the people who have borne the cost of the mess that you inflicted on the Irish people.
Thank you. 1 minute.
Thank you. Minister, you didn't protect families yesterday. You didn't protect those who need the respite grant. You didn't protect families with low income by charging them the same PRSI increase as those on high income. Again, I want to quote you from your party chairman.
Question instead.
Your party chairman, and that's the Labour Party. I know you've been in a lot of parties. Party Chairman Keaveney said last night, tonight's vote, not a vote on Budget 13 in its entirety, only on elements I can live with. Next week is a different story. And then later, tonight's vote touches on little that's problematic.
Would you ask your question, please?
That's for next week, and the effort to stop them begins this evening. What is Chairman Keaveney's effort to stop them? And once again, can you confirm that all of the provisions announced by Minister Burton yesterday will be contained in the social welfare bill, or will Chairman Keaveney's effort to stop them undermine the entire budget?
Thank you. Minister, thank you. 1 minute.
Well, Ken Corlea, in terms of PRSI, for the first time in the history of this state, following on the decision to lift the ceiling so that PRSI is attachable to all income, in future it will be attachable to all unearned income, so that whether your income is from shares and dividends, or whether it is from rental properties, or whether it is from professional fees, or whatever, it will be now responsible. It will be now responsible to pay PRSI. And the fact of the matter is, you can't take a single item and present it in the partisan fashion that you have done. Overall, the PRSI fund, which is in deep trouble, is essential to maintain benefits, and it is the very poorest and most modest paid in our society who get most of the benefits, because whether you are earning 120,000 or 20,000, you get the same pension. You get the same pension. And for the first time, those who have unearned income are now responsible for PRSI. And it is the utmost of humbug for Fianna Fáil. having brought the country to the verge of ruin, to be coming in here now with these kind of positions, it would appear that the leopard doesn't change its spot. And from where I'm looking across at Fianna Fáil, there are as many spots over there as if you had the measles. I mean, being circulated, a leaflet being put around in opposition to the property tax. Who is putting it around, Concordia? The very man who negotiated it, Micheál Martin.
Thank you.
The Dalai Lama of Ballinlough comes in here
Minister, I
pretending.
have to ask you, we do not display leaflets in the chamber. It's a long tradition. Thank you. I must ask you
I'm sorry,
to finish.
sir. I
must ask you to finish. We're way over time.
I won't display the leaflet. I won't display the leaflet. But it is the utmost in hypocrisy for the party that brought this country to the edge of ruin to come in here now pretending, having negotiated the very memorandum of understanding that required this government to bring in a property tax, and now take up a hypocritical position of opposition to it.
Deputy MacDonald, please. Thank you. Now, I want to warn you, I'm not going to tolerate shouting from either side of the chamber. Now, I'm warning you, and I'm giving plenty of notice. Now, Deputy MacDonald, without interruption, and I mean without interruption.
Thank you, Count Corley. Well, Minister Rabbitte, it is the utmost of humbug, Scrooge, for you to come in here and to make any pretence that yesterday's budget was fair. We all know that it represented a betrayal of a whole range of promises that you collectively, but the Labour Party in particular, made to the electorate before the last election. That's your problem. But more to the point, it represented an all-out attack on older people, on families, on women and on children. Now, there's a whole range of issues that I could raise with you this morning, Minister Rabbitte. The cut to child benefit is an obvious one. The taxation of maternity benefit. The really mean cut to the back-to-school allowance for footwear and clothing for children, which I find shocking and indefensible. But I want to raise with you, I want to raise with you just one of the bad decisions that you've made, and it is the one around the respite care grant. You've cut €325 from 77,000 families, 20,000 of whom receive no other state payment. But all of these families who care for a person, many of whom have very severe disabilities, including children.
Thank you.
Now, I want to put it to you, Minister, that you need to reverse this particular decision, because you breached fairness comprehensively in your budget. But you see this cut, this isn't even about fairness. This is about decency. And making this kind of cut breaches decency.
Thank you.
Your backbenchers will make a lot of noise and indulge in amateur dramatics and theatrics on a range of issues. But I want to say to them and to you, on this one, on this cut, for respite, for families that struggle, families that give care to people the length and breadth of this state, on this one, Minister Rabbitte, you and your Cabinet colleagues must back down.
Minister, thank you. Without interruption, please.
Well, Concordia, my backbenchers cannot compete in making noise with Deputy MacDonald. She makes less sense economically than the flaky stuntsmen in the technical group, and she refused to submit. And she refused.
Sorry, will you sit down, please?
You're putting the
Will you sit down? Will you sit down? You were at this the other day. You were at this the other day. You're trying to get yourself thrown out again. I'm not going to satisfy you. Sit down. Don't be making a show of yourself.
Stuntman number one.
You're not going to get thrown out if you think you are.
I thought it was interesting last night during the budget that the only squealing that came from the technical group was when you were made to account for your leader's allowance. That was the only squealing. That's the real respite. That's the real respite that you're concerned about.
MacDonald's question, please. Could we answer Deputy
The fact of the matter is...
this is impossible now, and I'm getting fed up with it. Prime Minister, would you please answer the question and let us get on with it? Now, please stay quiet.
The fact of the matter, Cancorlia, on the question of women and families and social welfare, this budget has protected core social welfare rates. It has maintained in existence the qualified child allowance and the family income supplement. It has maintained child benefit as a universal payment.
You stay quiet.
It has maintained child benefit as a universal payment. It has protected lower and middle income families from tax increases. And in terms of the contribution from the better off in our society, it has contributed more than £500 million. Now, the difference between the task confronting the government and confronting Sinn Féin is that we have to bring in a budget that is workable. And 40% of current spending goes towards the social welfare budget. It is not possible to make the savings that we are mandatorily required to make and not impact on social welfare. And the question was how to do it best. And the decisions that have been made, well, compare them to up the road in Newry. Compare them to the rates that apply in Newry and that have been approved by your party.
Thank you.
Have a look.
Would you stay quiet, Deputy Ellis, please? That's another country entirely. Just to stay quiet.
Or compare the fact that property tax is between £800 sterling and £1,100 sterling in Newry. You don't seem to have any difficulty with that.
Thank you, Minister.
But you have a partitionist mentality when it comes down here to dealing with the budget. The fact of the matter is, we have gone out of our way to ensure that those who can pay most have done so in this budget, and those who need to be protected are protected.
Thank you. Deputy MacDonald, without interruption, please.
But you know, Minister Rabbitte, I'm not particularly interested in your outpourings and your attacks on Sinn Féin. That's par for the course. I've asked you a very direct question about respite care. That's what I've asked you. So don't try and worm your way out of this. You know that this cut is wrong. You have to know. You can't stand on your feet and talk about protecting the vulnerable and then launch an attack on carers. People who care in many instances for people with profound disabilities. Do you get that, Pat Rabbitte? Do you actually
Minister, please,
get that? I heard your colleague Joan Burton saying to the parents who rely on the back-to-school allowance to shop around. How out of touch is she? She clearly doesn't know how much it costs to get a child back to school these days. Are you telling now carers to shop around?
Thank you.
Are you actually that cheap? Are you actually that glib? And this isn't a moment for comedy in this chamber. I'm putting it to you that this cut of €325 is wrong. It is indefensible. It's not just unfair, it's indecent. And if you have any decency left in you, revise this matter and tell the carers out there that you will row back on it. You must do that. And if you don't do it, Minister, let me make a prediction. There will be a sufficient public outcry that if you don't make the reverse voluntarily, you will be forced to reverse on this. But do the decent thing, Pat Rabbitte.
Sorry. There's a tradition in this House that we address members by their title, and I'd ask people to do that. It's been a tradition. Thank you.
Concordia,
In fact, I'm being reminded of the standing order.
very serious objective of this government was to ensure that the caring profession was protected. And confronted with the situation we were confronted, we had a choice of protecting the carers' allowance, the half carers' allowance, and dealing with a modest cut in the respite allowance. The people who do the caring will get exactly the same allowance as before the budget. The people who are entitled to claim the half carers will get the half carers just like the day before the budget. And we have gone to great care to ensure that those people are ring-fenced. And in terms of, throwing in rhetorical flourishes about back to school and various other things, the Minister and the Minister for Education will bring forward proposals later showing, for example, additional investment in the provision of hot meals for children in certain socio-economic areas. Where it has been in practice up to now, it's been especially successful. So, Concordia, protecting the core rates of social welfare, maintaining the benefits that are there for the people who are actually doing the caring. This is a respite grant, and do you decide to take some modest decrease in that, or cut the provision for caring?
Thank you.
There is no way that you can bring in a budget, the sixth in a row, that have made cuts upon cuts because of the crisis in which the country finds itself. It simply was not possible to do it as the sixth budget in a row unless savings were made across the board.
Thank you, Deputy.
Everybody had to contribute something, otherwise it's not possible to comply with the targets being imposed on us.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Pringle, thank you. Without interruption, thank you.
Thank you, Concordia. Minister, we were constantly told in the run-up to the budget that the budget would be fair and equal, and those that can pay would. But I think now we see after yesterday where the truth lies. The low earners of this country are left again to bear the brunt of the cuts and have the Fine Gael Labour coalition to thank for it. We were told yesterday that we were near the end of the austerity budget, and you said again today that 85% of the heavy lifting has been done. But I think what you fail to understand is that many people can't just take any more. This is yet another budget that fails to hit the highest earners in society and targets the vulnerable in a brutal way. This government has clearly lost sight of what people are experiencing on the ground. Removing the €127 PRSI exemption threshold will cost every worker in the state earning above the minimum wage €264 per annum. A person earning €18,000 a year will pay the same PRSI increase as us here in this House TDs earning €92,000 a year. How can you as a Labour Minister justify that in any way? Fine Gael guaranteed that there would be no increases in income tax. But for low-income workers, PRSI is a tax on income. To say that they have not increased income tax is misleading at best. The Minister for Finance said PRSI is good value, especially for those on the lower part of the income distribution, those with shorter distribution histories. I think if these people's voices were heard, they would say that good value is when the money is in their pockets and not being taken off them with this cut. Labour have made much of wanting to increase the universal social charge on those earning over €100,000 per year, but they lost that battle to their masters in the coalition. Yet you are happy to take away the PRSI threshold. Labour does not protect the vulnerable, and you are targeting them further and further. How can you and your Labour Party colleagues stand over the cutting of the PRSI allowance threshold? Is that what you call a fair budget?
Thank you, Deputy.
Concordia, I agree with Deputy Pringle that nobody in their right mind would want to find themselves where we are. But we have to deal with the world as we find it, not as we would like it. The countries that we're trading with are in recession. The Eurozone is back in recession. Growth expectations that you might have had in other circumstances haven't been realised. So savings have to be made because we've only one lender and we won't be able to pay carers allowance and we won't be able to pay teachers and firemen and Gardaí unless we can raise the money. And there's only one lender prepared to give us the money. And they're establishing certain conditions with which we have to comply. And that's what we're seeking to do. Now, you take the PRSI issue that you raise, Deputy Pringle, and you chose to ignore that for the first time in the history of the state, the best off in our society will be required to declare their unearned income from whatever source for PRSI purposes. And that's part of refurbishing the social insurance fund. Because the people who are most dependent on the social insurance fund are not people paid 100,000 or 200,000 or more, because they get the same pension as somebody on 20,000. The people who get most out of the social insurance fund are the people on modest and low incomes. And the social insurance fund is in dire trouble. And we have to maintain the social insurance fund as a solidarity with people on low incomes and on modest incomes. And that's what we're doing. Nobody under 18,300 is going to be liable for the PRSI disallowance. Nobody under 18,300. Nobody under 10,000 and whatever it is, 600, is liable for the universal social charge, because we took 330,000 people out of the universal social charge last year. So the attempt to keep the social insurance fund in place is the one insurance policy that people on modest and low incomes have in an uncertain world, and in particular in preparation for their senior years. So in terms of the overall changes made there, they are well balanced and well judged, because what is more important for people than to have that safety net if they should come to need it, and of course they'll certainly come to need it after the pension age.
Thank you. Deputy Pringle.
Thank you, Concorda. So now we see today, Minister, that the Troika are to blame for the PRSI increase, and it was forced on you. That must be what you're telling the Labour backbenchers to make them accept it. Minister, I know the Irish League of Credit Unions offered the government €5 billion for investment, and the government wouldn't take it. You refused it. So there is other lenders out there that could be tapped into. The Social Insurance Fund is in deficit, and in a recession, the Social Insurance Fund should be in deficit, and in good times it will be built up again. We have been funding the Social Insurance Fund through this recession from government revenue. And do you actually think, in telling people that it's fair that at €18,000 a year you should lose €264 out of your wages, and that's fair and that's balanced by charging PRSI on people on high incomes? You tried to get the universal social charge increased. You lost that battle to Fine Gael, but yet you bring in this PRSI increase. You should have turned around and said, no, we won't do it, we'll do one in exchange for the other, but you couldn't even manage that. There is no fairness in this budget for the low paid and all the other items that people have identified here today. And how can you still say that that's fair and that's a reasonable outcome?
Thank you. Minister.
What we want to ensure, Concordia, is that going into the future, that people who are unfortunate enough to temporarily lose their employment or reach retirement age or whatever are protected insofar as this state can do it. And it does it quite well. It does it better than comparable states in the OECD or within the European Union. And it does it better than the Northern Ireland state adjacent to Deputy Pringle. And I'm very proud of that. And for Deputy Pringle to sneer at the Troika's injunctions only means that he doesn't have to contend with it. There is no sentiment there. They loan us money, they set conditions for it, and we comply with them or they don't sign the cheque. There's no mystery about it. And protecting and refurbishing, what about Greece? What about, there are people hungry at the bottom of the pile in Greece.
Thank you. Thank you. We're over time now.
There are tens of thousands. There are tens of thousands of public servants disemployed in Greece. People are paying tax. People are paying tax at USC rates in this country, as low as 10,000 liable to full tax in Greece, and a whole lot of other impositions. So if colleagues over there want to argue that we should go the way of Greece, this government doesn't agree with that. This government doesn't agree with that. And when, you know, Deputy Pringle refuses to acknowledge decisions in the budget, like slashing tax relief on pension pots for people who expect a pension of over 60,000, the mansion tax on homes over $1 million, the USC increase of 3% on better-off pensioners, extending.
Thank you, Minister.
Well, now
we're over time. Thank you.
I'm not going to trace along the benches there on that particular one because it wouldn't be.
It's only Deputy Pringle that has asked the question. Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Extending the PRSI to all incomes, the capital gains tax, the capital acquisitions tax, the dirt tax, all of them increases on wealth and on people better off in this society.
Thank you.
So, Concordia, at the risk of wearying you, can I just say that insofar as the government had it within its power, it took money from the people who are best able to pay it. Everybody has to contribute something. Everybody has to contribute something. But those who need a safety net, that safety net has been protected, and we're proud of that.
Thank you. That